The views expressed on this episode of My Take Radio do not reflect the views, thoughts, or feelings of the My Take Radio staff, My Take Radio advertisers, or My Take Radio content partners. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
This coverage is live and uncensored, so if you have any small children present, you may want to have them leave the room.
What's up, guys? My Take Radio episode 355, powered by Rageworks, broadcasting live Wednesday, July 27th, 2016. I'm your host, Rich, and our call-in number is 347-324-3541. Again, that call-in number, 347-324-3541. If this is your first time tuning into My Take Radio is a variety show covering mixed martial arts, professional wrestling, gaming, and entertainment. We air live every Wednesday, usually at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, to cover MMA and wrestling, and Thursdays, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, to cover gaming and entertainment. This show is simulcast on mtrlive.com in audio and video formats. You can also watch the video stream via Twitch, Vaughn Live, and YouTube as well. Audio can be listened to either by using the call-in number 347-324-3541 and not hitting option 1 to enter the switchboard, and you'll be able to listen that way. You can also download the Mixlr app, M-I-X-L-R, for iOS and Android, and punch in My Take Radio, and you'll be able to listen to the show that way with 96K stereo sound. And also, if you are a listener of the if you're a listener of the Black is the New Black podcast, you can also listen to that live simulcast on Mixlr as well. So, we were supposed to start at 11 o'clock. That was my goal. And come in, get the studio ready, start everything up, and no video. So, if you guys tuned in last week, you know that we got a brand new HD camera. We were streaming in 1080p, 60 frames per second, beautiful, crisp, delightful video. And what ended up happening was the video card that we were using at the time, we had some issues setting it up. We thought it was good. Clearly it wasn't, because when I tried to force the video to play or to render, it caused a blue screen of death on my PC. And I actually thought that we were not going to have a show this evening. So, luckily, I still had my my USB webcams, which I was able to use for this week's show. Obviously, as much as I tried to avoid it, it looks like I will need to make the investment with a brand new capture card. If you're somebody who live streams and have any recommendations, right now I'm leaning towards a Elgato HD60 or maybe a Live Gamer Pro for dual purpose, obviously for streaming the show and for gaming as well. Would love to hear your thoughts on it. Otherwise, definitely getting rid of this I use a Blackmagic Intensity, and hasn't been working. Big pain in the ass, that's for damn sure. The other thing was, a lot of people were telling me about the issues with the audio kind of being behind the video slightly. Actually, that I did manage to resolve, and I'm hoping that that is the case for this week's episode, as it turns out that it is a setting for the audio delay by milliseconds. So we've adjusted the delay, and yes, that's right, Slick, Live Gamer Extreme, thank you. We've adjusted the delay by about 100 milliseconds or so, and we did some test video. Looks good, everything is in sync. I am hoping that it is also in sync on YouTube, where we also applied the 100 millisecond delay. Now, I can only hope that in applying that delay for YouTube, it didn't mess up Twitch, Vaughn Live, and any of the other providers. So if you are using any of those, please feel free to reach out via social media or email. Let me know, and we'll continue to tweak it as best as we can. A couple of things we want to get into for this week's show. Obviously, we're going to talk about this past weekend's UFC event. We're going to talk about Battleground, Raw, SmackDown, this week's wrestling's... Wow, a lot of fucking up tonight. This week's wrestling news, and want to talk about a crazy lucha event that I attended this past Sunday with my wife, my buddy Kimbo Slice, and young Jay. I don't want to put his name out there out of respect, but we all went to check out this lucha event put on by Lucha Libre Productions, and it was crazy. It was insane. Some really good indie wrestling. Main event was Lucha Underground's Phoenix and Pentagon Jr. squaring off. Hardcore markout mode for yours truly. I'll definitely get into that a little bit during the wrestling segment. But before I want to get into that, I'll get into a couple of housekeeping matters I did want to get out of the way. First and foremost, for those of you that have asked, we are going to be on iHeartRadio. The goal is probably within the next week. We were supposed to have that finalized by tomorrow, but according to what I've been told, the settings for it and the amount of shows that we have is making things a little more difficult to set up. Not necessarily a bad thing. They just want to work all the bugs out. Once we got that set up, I will, of course, let you guys know, and you'll be able to get the shows via iHeartRadio. For Google Play and Spotify, still a couple of weeks out. I thought we would have that closed out by the end of the month. Also, Google Play requires a little bit of legwork on my part, just trying to get all the feeds set up. And also, since we are going to do it as the RageWorks network, that's going to require some new art and a couple of other things that need to be designed. So we're in the process of doing that, trying to get some designers for that. We have a couple of, I want to say, tentative designs that I've seen thus far that people have sent me, and I like what I'm seeing. Of course, a select few of you and our staff will probably get to see those designs before they go live, just for feedback and anything else, so we can tweak it accordingly. But I think once we have that set up for the RageWorks network, that will, of course, that branding will carry over to iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio as well, and you'll be able to just punch in the RageWorks network and get all the shows that way. As I mentioned last week, there is a way for you to subscribe to the individual shows if you prefer. You can just go to rageworks.net, go to the podcast section, and pretty much dump the RSS for that podcast into your podcatcher of choice, and you'll be able to listen to those shows that way. I did some testing with it for a couple of our shows, and it did work. Of course, if you have any issues with that, please let me know. That way we can work on making sure that that is remedied for you guys. Last but not least, a couple of things on the contest front. Of course, we did our huge Game of Thrones contest, which was out of this world. Amazing turnout. Congrats to the winner, Erin, who should have her package within the next couple of days. We are going to launch a special contest in partnership with our friends at Ripped Apparel, who, of course, do daily pop culture T-shirts of different designs. They have expanded quite a bit, not just T-shirts. They do art prints, tank tops, tote bags, etc. So we are going to partner with them for a giveaway. So if you're a fan of Deadpool, you may want to tune in either for tomorrow's show or next week for details on that contest. And, of course, we will publish it on rageworks.net. Just trying to iron out all the details in terms of entries. Going to have to make you guys work a little bit for this one, as always, just because we have partners invested as well. So it's not just going to be, hey, answer this random question and you get a prize. I mean, don't get me wrong. We like to do those giveaways too, just to help get you guys some stuff. But when, we got to work with people, there's a little bit more legwork that has to be done, a couple of quote-unquote hoops you have to jump through. But nonetheless, I think that we've had an incredible success rate with our contest thus far. We went from 10 people entering to 50 people entering to over 100 people entering for the Game of Thrones giveaway, and I'm incredibly pumped for that. Also, got a couple of unboxing videos that we actually took off the My Take Radio channel and are uploading to the Rageworks channel to go with a couple of product reviews that we are working on, including a Huawei smartwatch Elegant Edition. My wife is being the guinea pig for that. Obviously, not one, because the watch is pink or rose gold, and it's a lady's watch, of course. And we're also working on some Plantronics headset reviews. We got some stuff from HyperX as well. So make sure to subscribe to the Rageworks YouTube channel if you have not already to keep up with that stuff. And, of course, keep it locked to Rageworks.net for all the product reviews as well. All right. I think that's going to wrap up the housekeeping for this episode. Let's jump into this week's MMA. Lots of notes to discuss for this week's episode. Of course, UFC on Fox 20 was this past weekend. All eyes were on Holly Holm as she got back in the cage, trying to shake off the loss to Miesha Tate. Very, very big buzz for her fight with Valentina Shevchenko. And the fight did not disappoint. Unfortunately, for those of you that are fans of Holly Holm, you did not get the result you wanted, as Valentina Shevchenko, I'm going to probably bludgeon that poor girl's name a dozen times, really put the work on Holly Holm. She secured the victory via decision in an incredible performance. I was thoroughly impressed with how she really picked apart the former champion. Everybody thought that it was going to be just a heavy striking exchange between both ladies. Obviously, Valentina Shevchenko coming in with a solid Muay Thai background, of course, taking on the esteemed and veteran pugilist in Holly Holm. Of course, that was not the case. Styles do make fights, and in this case, Shevchenko's style was definitely infinitely better than Holly Holm. I mean, Holly Holm came out of the gate aggressive in the first round, looked really good, but Shevchenko dialed it in from round 2 on, and it was just pretty much a systematic dismantling of the former champion. And it makes for a promising case, especially for Shevchenko. I mean, a lot of people were saying that Juliana Pena secured herself a title opportunity, but I think Shevchenko also has a claim to that, defeating a former champion. If I were in the booking seat for this particular situation, I would definitely book a title eliminator between Pena and Shevchenko, with the winner getting Amanda Nunes. Of course, wishful thinking, but that is how I would book it if I were the matchmaker. Well, let's get into the bugs, which many of you know are the bad, the ugly, and the good. I like to lead with the bad news first. The ugly, of course, like I said, Shevchenko and Holm, not because it was an ugly fight, but just because it was a mix of styles that just didn't work well for Holly Holm. And in that respect, it was just it was ugly to see, but only because it was just a really, I want to say, one-sided affair. I mean, it's, like I said, Holly Holm came out aggressive in that first round, but then Shevchenko all the way through to wrap it up. And that's pretty much it. There's not much more to elaborate in that regard, except Holly Holm has to go back, reassess, and try and get back in there. But I think that one of the reasons that Holly Holm is getting caught isn't so much, and when I mean getting caught, not losing, by knockout or submission, but just getting picked apart, is because many people now have watched tape, lots and lots and lots of tape. And the thing is that even though she is evolving, she's not evolving at a rate that's going to make her fresh to anyone that she fights. A lot of fighters, they have certain skills that they're known for, and those skills are the skills that you got to scout for. And of course, the goal is to go and expand your repertoire, learn something else, and then come back in there and really, really show us something different. And for some fighters, it's it's immediate, the changes. For some, it's something that happens gradually. For others, they just rely on what they've been doing for as long as I can remember, and that's pretty much how they end up securing the victories that they get until, of course, people start figuring them out from bell to bell, and then they're not as successful. I think Shevchenko was just a more well-rounded striker. Not to say that Holly Holm isn't. Like I said, Holly Holm is an incredible boxer. Her stand-up is good. Her hands are solid. And I say that her hands are solid because I know many of you are going to be like, how are you going to say that? She's a boxer. People that are good boxers that transition to MMA, I feel that many of them regress in terms of how they throw punches. If you watch a lot of MMA fights and you're someone who's a fan of boxing, me being a boxing novice, I am, I'm only doing this based on visual. But if you are someone who is a hardcore boxing fan, you're going to be able to figure out and see immediately that the quote-unquote boxing that is applied in MMA is a far departure from the sweet science many people are used to seeing in a boxing ring. And I think that for many fighters, they come in, they're trying to get well-rounded. Some fighters, I feel that they're told that, hey, throwing strikes like that isn't effective. And boxing's been around a long fucking time. Last time I checked, if you knew how to throw hands, it was pretty effective. I mean, obviously you got to use all your limbs when you're doing that, when you're fighting in MMA, but that doesn't take away from the fact that a dedicated boxing coach and just dedication to the art itself is going to really show for certain fighters more than others. I mean, a lot of fighters are told, oh yeah, this guy has great hands, and they do in terms of just MMA punching, but a lot of people, they'll go and they'll be like, yeah, this guy's going to transition to boxing and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, listen, just because it works in MMA, it's a different level of striking in boxing. I've said this before. I really, really hate the constant comparisons between both sports. Aside from them both being quote-unquote violent sports, there are substantial differences. Not just in the way that the training is done, but just in the execution as a whole. I mean, in MMA, you're training for, 3 5-round fights or 5 5-round fights. In boxing, you're training for, 12, 15 rounds, depending on the fight. And the way I see it is you're looking at just a necessity to separate both of them. Like I said, I'm not somebody who's a boxing aficionado, not by any means. My relationship with boxing is watching Muhammad Ali fight when I was a kid, a little bit when Mike Tyson burst on the scene, and that's pretty much been it. Occasionally, Kimbo Slice, who showed me a couple of boxing fights, Golovkin, those guys, Canelo, seeing those guys fight, and I respect it. I respect the art form. I respect the technique and the discipline that's involved. It's not for me. Not to take anything away from it, because again, it's a sport that when you get invested in it, you find much enjoyment. I mean, I knew people that were hardcore boxing fans in the 90s, and it was every weekend. Talking about guys like Riddick Bowe, Mike Tyson, of course, Lennox Lewis, Prince Nassim, Roy Jones Jr. I mean, I know my fair share of fighters. I learned about Prince Nassim one day because I saw a video package and everybody was like, "Oh man, this guy's crazy. He's a showboat. He's insane." And I was like, "All right, how crazy is this dude?" And I remember I watched an HBO special on him, and I was just like, "Holy shit, this guy is pretty crazy." And I'm not talking about crazy in the sense of athletic prowess, but just in the way that he conducted himself and the way he marketed himself, which was pretty nuts, pretty fucking crazy. I think the only other memorable boxing thing, as someone who's a novice can remember, was when Trinidad took on Bernard Hopkins, and Bernard Hopkins threw the Puerto Rican flag on the floor, and people went fucking crazy. Like, what the fuck is happening? What the hell? I'm like, oh my God, it was a pretty big deal back then, especially for someone like me, who, like I said, is a novice when it comes to that. So it's interesting, you know, to compare it to a point. But the people that constantly sit there and they go into this deep analysis on you know, the differences between both sports, it's like they're very, 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 very different. From the money to, you know, the promoters to the titles to everything, substantially different. But people always want to pit one against the other. It's no different than, you know, lucha libre versus puro versus you know, wrestling in the U.S. There's always purists for each. But I figured I would share my thoughts on that. In any case, there was nothing bad about this Fox card. On the contrary, all the fights were solid. They were either really, really good fights that yielded some decisions, or really awesome finishes that were just, you know, they were crazy. Like I said, you know, Shevchenko and Holmes goes into the ugly column for the reasons I stated. But now, good moments. Edson Barboza, Gilbert Melendez, El Nino definitely is going to be walking a little gingerly for the next couple of weeks as Edson Barboza just put the work in. Lots of nasty, nasty leg kicks. I thought back to Jose Aldo and Uriah Faber when I saw this fight. Barboza looked really good against a very, very dangerous opponent in El Nino, Gilbert Melendez. Really thought that Melendez was going to come in there and impose his will. Not to take anything away from Barboza, but Melendez is just he's a good fighter. Probably one that's considered in the all-time greats category, depending on who you ask. But I was shocked the way he was chopped down by Edson Barboza in that fight. Also, Felice Herrig's submission victory was it was a thing of beauty to see. I think that, you know, Felice Herrig gets a bum rap from a lot of people because of the way she markets herself and, you know, everything that she does to raise her quote-unquote social profile. And a lot of people felt that when she actually got put in the UFC and she fought, you know, her last couple of fights, that she was quote-unquote exposed, which I don't think is the right way to look at it. I think that there was a transition to someone who is part of a bigger machine. Obviously, you know, brand awareness and being your own brand is a huge part for many fighters, but you also got to take into account that there's, you know, a level of competition that is substantially higher than, you know, the previous organizations you were in. I think for Felice Herrig, that was definitely apparent in the early goings. I think she had a tremendous training camp. You know, she had some issues she had to deal with, both personal and professional, from what I've heard. And I think that what we saw was probably one of the best versions of Felice Herrig we've seen. Gone are the days of, you know, senseless, scantily clad social media photos. I mean, they're still out there. You know, it is what it is. But it's not that constant barrage of, you know, over-sexualized content. I think it's because, you know, she's become more disciplined as a fighter, really applied her energies to other things. I mean, she did American Ninja Warrior, and I just feel that she dove into the training head first, and it definitely paid off. Her submission victory was definitely nice to see. I was thoroughly impressed, and hopefully we'll continue to see that. I think that she is one of those fighters that you can market and would be one of the stars that you can build a division around. I think that, you know, they had tried to do that with Carla Esparza coming in as the champion during the Ultimate Fighter. Obviously didn't go according to plan, but I think that, you know, Cookie Monster and the Little Bulldog still have something to offer the UFC and mixed martial arts in general, and we're going to be watching it with very, very vested interest, just because, like I said, I've followed these fighters' careers from their other organizations, and to see them transition now into this bigger role in an organization that, you know, it's a fucking juggernaut. It's definitely interesting to see. The other fight I wanted to talk about, Wineland and Godofredo Pepe, because, man, that was, woo, it was scary stuff. And the reason I want to talk about it is because of the way that fight played out. You know, the fight, Eddie Wineland looked really good as soon as the bell rang. And actually, let me rephrase that. Two fights I want to talk about: Eddie Wineland, Frankie Saenz, and then I want to talk about Pepe's fight as well. You know, Eddie Wineland ended up taking fight of the night for this. Definitely well-earned, dispatching Frankie Saenz via TKO in the third round. It was wild, man. It was a wild fight. Eddie Wineland looked good. I think he definitely made a strong case for himself in his division. You know, bantamweights, it's crazy because he came in ranked number 12, and bantamweights is one of those divisions which, much like I've talked about with the 170-pounders and the 185-pounders, there's a lot of competition in those weight classes that you got to come in there and really make a statement to start cracking that top 10. Eddie Wineland came in, you know, he was ranked 15 to take on Frankie Saenz, ranked number 12, and man, it wasn't even a, I don't want to say it was one-sided, but it was just a stellar performance by Wineland from bell to bell. I was thoroughly impressed. You know, I want to talk about Pepe's fight with Darren Elkins. You know, Godofredo Pepe Castro, for those of you that don't know him by his fighting name, Pepe, is he's an interesting fighter to watch. I actually thought that he was going to come in and impress taking on Darren Elkins, but unfortunately, you know, I think that what I saw from the highlight reels on YouTube and social media and what we saw in the fight wasn't what I was hoping for. And the reason I say this is just because, you know, it was you got to look at it this way. When you're watching guys like Pepe and Elkins fight, you know, Elkins is ranked number 11, came into the fight 20-5. Pepe was 12-3 when he came in. Elkins has, you know, substantial experience, a guy who's been fighting in the quote-unquote big time for a little bit. And I want to say that because of that, he knows how to approach his fights. I don't want to say methodically, but definitely more grounded. You know, he comes out of the gate. He knows how to utilize every bit of his arsenal. I mean, the guy was 3 inches taller than Pepe coming in. You know, you look at that. And height, for a lot of people, they look at it and they're like, you know, that's not a big factor. You know, 3 inches is the difference between, you know, throwing a kick and hitting somebody in the midsection versus getting a nice head kick and scoring a head kick knockout. I mean, those 3 inches make a hell of a lot of difference. Obviously, flexibility is a big factor. But I really thought that from the highlight reels I saw for Pepe online that he was gonna show some of what many people have seen in, you know, highlight reels in the fight against Darren Elkins. But Elkins was just a more well-rounded opponent from bell to bell. I mean, you know, there was a point deduction in the second round, but you know, it was nasty too, only because of the knee that was, you know, that went in there. He Pepe, and that was one of the reasons why I kind of jumped around when I was doing my notes, was because when I was writing my notes for the show, he had landed the illegal knee, and everybody kind of thought, oh man, you know, Pepe is gonna, he may still secure the victory. But Elkins dialed it in, man. He looked really good. Got the fight via unanimous decision. I was talking to a buddy of mine about this fight, and, you know, he scored it a little differently. He kind of felt that even with the point deduction, Pepe had the opportunity to win this fight. And, you know, I watched the fight on two separate occasions, once live and once, you know, while prepping for the show. And it could have gone either way, but I think that that loss of the point in the second allowed Elkins to really turn it up in the third and really just kind of swing the pendulum in his direction to get the decision from the judges. But either way, still a good fight. You know, like I said, wins for Wineland and Elkins were definitely highlights for this weekend's UFC card. All right, let's talk fighter bonuses. As I said, Eddie Wineland took a fight bonus. Felice Herrig took a bonus. And fight of the night went to Jason Knight and Jim Allers. $50,000 were handed out to each of these guys. So congrats for an extra bit of money in your wallet. Now to switch gears, got to talk about Brock Lesnar, of course. Brock continues to be in the news for a multitude of reasons. Obviously, we are waiting to see how the other, quote-unquote, other shoe drops regarding the PED testing that obviously he failed. And, of course, the commentary from Randy Orton on Sunday was interesting. And, of course, his match with Randy Orton during SummerSlam. And, of course, Mark Hunt, which I'm going to get into. Not happy with Brock, but it gets crazier. Brock Lesnar is not going to be receiving any punishment from WWE for his failed drug tests. A spokesman for WWE told TMZ Sports that only full-time members of the active roster are covered under the company's wellness policy. Since Lesnar wrestles part-time, he doesn't fit that criteria. So the reason why I wanted to share this with you is because it's insane. And I'll tell you why. It wasn't that long ago that Billy Gunn was caught for using performance-enhancing drugs in a powerlifting competition. And, of course, he was suspended by the governing body, kicked out, and subsequently, shortly after, he was cut loose by WWE for, quote-unquote, that violation. Now, many people felt that that was a bullshit termination, and the reason is because many people felt that Billy Gunn wasn't exactly wrestling every week. He was, I believe, a trainer in NXT at the time and not an active member of the roster. And the thing that gets me is that Brock Lesnar didn't fight in 5 years. Comes in, chiseled out of granite, looks like the final boss in the game. Everybody joked about that he was already on the sauce, make whatever, jokes about it you wish. But the thing that gets me is that you're still participating in an athletic contest. Obviously one that's heavily scripted, but WWE suspends people for quote-unquote performance-enhancing drugs on a pretty decent basis. Obviously, they pick and choose who they suspend. Randy Orton, we're looking at you, versus, I don't know, Roman Reigns. But, Brock Lesnar is exempt because he is not a full-time wrestler. So, in saying this, I understand that they had to issue a statement and acknowledge this, but they also pretty much said that if you are a part-time wrestler, you have carte blanche to do whatever you want, which explains, hate to say it, but when The Rock was filming Hercules and he came back to wrestle John Cena, that he looked like a completely different person. He looked like the dude that ate The Rock. Like it was like a completely different human being. And obviously, he was like, yeah, my training regimen for Hercules, blah, 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 blah. But this admission from the WWE shows that part-time guys are not under the same, they're not covered under the same umbrella as the rest of the roster. And of course, you could make a case that says, yeah, well, they're part-time performers, whatever. But the whole point of testing for PEDs is for testing for PEDs. Whether you're part-time or full-time should be irrelevant. If your name gets pulled out of the proverbial hat, then you should be held accountable for whatever you have, whether it's positive or negative. You pass, you pass. You fail, you got to get suspended. I just feel that WWE shot themselves in the foot by reacting so quickly. Had they said, the findings of the the USADA don't impact professional wrestling as we have our own guidelines for testing, it would have been a better response than pretty much saying, well, if you're a part-time guy and you fucking juice, it's totally cool. Because that's, the short version is that's pretty much how they laid things out. Do I think it's right? Do I think it's wrong? It's up to interpretation. See, Brock Lesnar testing positive for PEDs, and it's a slap in the face to his opponent. Obviously, it's a slap in the face to the organization, especially because a third party is governing it. It's not like the UFC could have swept that under the rug. It's also, like I said, it also hurts when it comes to his WWE role. And the reason I say that is because you know, you could just as easily get an entire arena chanting steroids, you know, or you're going to have that be acknowledged in every piece of press and interview that you do. I mean, WWE having a little fun with it with Randy Orton, you know, it's WWE getting in front of it so they don't have to deal with it, much like they did with Roman. But still, I just felt that the response that was given, you know, did the organization harm. I'm going to be honest. I mean, they could have just as easily been, hey, we have our own testing. If he was found guilty of using performance-enhancing drugs in the UFC, that's something that has to be handled between him and the organization. We have our own testing guidelines, and, you know, we will adjust accordingly and test Brock at you know, sometime. And that'll be it. Even if you never test Brock Lesnar, no one will ever know that. But at least if you get in front of it in a way that says, hey, you know, he was found guilty, or they found this in his system through that level of testing, you know, we test for this stuff too, we'll test again, et cetera, but just give yourself an answer that is a little bit safer than just, oh, well, he's not here all the time, so we don't know. It honestly didn't do the organization any favors, in my opinion. I think they should have just left the shit alone. But I think that's also partially because every website and media outlet has been searching for a WWE soundbite with regards to Brock Lesnar, and you know, it is what it is. I think it's a fucked up situation for all parties involved. Obviously, the WWE has to deal with it, so it hurts them, and you know, UFC, they've been getting hit left and right with guys pissing hot, and of course, for Mark Hunt, it's not pretty either, and that's something I want to talk about. Mark Hunt recently appeared on Ariel Helwani's MMA Hour, and to say that the guy was pissed is putting it mildly. I want to take a couple of excerpts to share with you. When asked about Brock Lesnar's cheating, I gotta read this to make sure I convey the words correctly. He says, before the fight, I was assuming he was cheating. Look at him. There's no way that guy makes 265 pounds. The guy is a gimp. He's sticking needles in his ass like the rest of these cheaters, and the thing about that is he's sitting here saying this is a fair place. Well, it's not fair. These guys are cheating, and they should be in court for it. They should lose all their money if they're cheating, because if I die in there, who's going to look after my family? That's corrupt shit. These motherfuckers should be penalized hard. Dirty, scummy, cheating scum. That's how that monkey won his world title. He didn't do it by doing it clean. He did it by cheating, just like the rest of these cheaters. Strong words. When asked about his future with the UFC, I got to tell you, he didn't mince words either. He said, I'll go work somewhere else. Like I said, I don't give a shit if we've got to sue their asses. Well, then fuck you, you're going to get sued. You scummy cunts. The problem is everyone these days, man, I want to get into the UFC. Fuck the UFC. You're shit. You motherfuckers don't look after anybody. End quote. He then adds, we'll let this fucking white piece of shit fucking stick needles in his ass and say, oh, he's going to take us all the way to the fucking bank. Let's give him fucking millions of dollars and not worry about this motherfucker. His words, not mine. You know what? Fuck that and fuck your shit company. Look at that for a contract. You can sue me on that, motherfuckers. He then added, people are scared for years because the company's going to get them. Well, fuck the company. They don't give shit about you. They don't give a shit about you or anyone else. If I walk away now, I don't care. I walk away knowing that I haven't cheated to get in this spot. I can keep my head up and say, you know, I might have to make a lot of different sacrifices to change the way things are, but so be it. That's fine. At least I knew that I went to the top, and all you find at the top are dirty fucking scummy cheaters and a company that's going to help them do it. I'll be comfortable with that. There's no way I even worry about that. You get told that it's a clean sport and people are testing, they're doing this and that, that's fine. You're doing all that testing, but what penalties are these monkeys giving them? You're not giving them no penalties at all. USADA, fucking NASA, whatever the fuck they are, what penalties are they giving them? Nothing. They're just saying, oh, hey, we caught this guy cheating and he has to give us all his money. What the fuck should you get? Hey, we caught this guy. He goes, what the fuck should you get? Why should they get that shit? They're not the ones who lost. They're not the ones who had their brand go down. I didn't say anything when I beat the other two guys who I fought who were cheating, and probably the rest of the other cheaters that I fought. But at the end of the day, enough is enough. You know what? I gotta agree with where Mark Hunt is coming from, because when he fought Bigfoot Silva, and after that it came out that Bigfoot Silva was also using PEDs, it's a frustrating thing. And you know, in the Bigfoot Silva fight, that's a fight that honestly took years off those guys' lives, because if you watch that fight, it was a violent, brutal, and bloody affair. And to Mark Hunt's point, the brand that he's established took damage, because when he lost to Brock, they're like, oh, Mark Hunt, fucking guy is, a knockout artist, comes in here and gets beat up by a guy who just got off his couch after being on it for 5 years. Obviously, I'm being facetious in saying that, but think about that. You gotta look at it from that perspective too. And whether Mark Hunt is, completely clean or not, that's between Mark Hunt and, his family and whoever else is on his management team. I mean, I look at Mark Hunt, I see a guy who is an incredibly talented fighter, incredibly dangerous, doesn't need to go to the ground because 9 times out of 10 he puts you to sleep. So make of that what you will. And, in Brock's case, if it's true that he was taking anti-estrogen drugs, then clearly, the smoking gun is there. Obviously, the athletic commission may reveal what it was that he tested positive for, or they may not. But I definitely can understand Mark Hunt's anger and frustration. I think that, this guy comes in, he takes this fight, it's a huge payday. Brock Lesnar makes this astronomical amount of money. Then he comes out, guilty. And the commission says, yeah, we're going to take whatever, $1 million or $500,000. And that's your fine. And it's true, that's your fine, but to his point, it's like, what does the guy who lost get? Nothing. It's obviously the extreme case. What if he would have died out there, or what if he would have suffered some sort of career-ending injury in that fight, and then it comes out that Brock Lesnar cheated? I mean, it's tough, man. It's tough from both sides of the coin. Obviously, like I've said before, if everybody's on the sauce, and it's a level playing field, but if some guys are on the sauce and some guys aren't, then obviously make of that what you will. Mark Hunt this guy is smoldering right now. And obviously the UFC is kind of tiptoeing around it, not really trying to give too much commentary on the situation for obvious reasons, but this is definitely something that's going to come to a head. I think that it's only going to get uglier with Mark Hunt. I think he's going to be very vocal and incredibly critical about the organization because of the way that this is played out for him. And, we're going to be watching it very closely. Like I said, it's been a bad situation all around. I mean, the John Jones thing, obviously, huge blow to the organization, huge blow to John Jones as a fighter. Brock Lesnar, too, because it's like, his image has been tarnished. I mean, whether people choose to fully get on board with that or not, it's always one of those things where you look at him, he's a freakish athlete. He is. I mean, I'm not taking that away from him. He's a monstrous human being. But when you got the WWE saying that, he's not subjected to those same tests as everyone else because he's a part-timer, it raises a lot of interesting questions. That's all I'm saying. We're going to be monitoring this story, obviously, because this is a lot bigger than PEDs. This is, the USADA, fighters, and, just the organization as a whole being dragged through the meat grinder. So I'm definitely going to be watching this very closely. If anything else happens with Mark Hunt, obviously, I will share it with you guys on future episodes. Another bit of interesting news with regards to PEDs I wanted to talk about is West Lynn, Oregon's bad guy, Chael Sonnen. Chael has kind of opened up a possibility of going back to the UFC and fighting. MMA Junkie reports that Chael was tested twice by the USADA recently, and a UFC official said that Sonnen asked to be entered into the testing pool as he's considering a potential return. For those of you that don't know, Chael announced his retirement in 2014, obviously. It was interesting because at the time, right before he quote-unquote retired, he was supposed to fight Vanderlei, then Vitor, but tested positive for 5 types of PEDs. Clomiphene, HCG, human growth hormone, recombinant human erythropoietin. I'm probably bludgeoning that completely. Anastrozole, just 5 PEDs he tested positive for. He subsequently retired, and he, like I said, served a 2-year suspension. So Chael is contemplating dipping his toes in the proverbial UFC return pool. Is it worth seeing the bad guy back in the cage? It depends. I mean, you know, if the guy's cleaned himself up and he's coming into the fights clean, so be it. But again, like the Brock Lesnar situation, if you come in and you're quote unquote clean and then you're not, it's going to be egg on your face and the UFC's face. And of course, obviously the case can be made that, oh yeah, well, the UFC, you know, picks and chooses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the way I look at it is, if the guy comes back and he can generate some revenue and get some good fights that are worth checking out, so be it. But man, you had 5 types of PEDs in your system, Chael. You better fucking, your piss better be clean from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, from the first test to the last test, because all it takes is one fucking thing. And I think that the commission's probably just going to throw the book at you, and the UFC is going to be like, don't even talk to us about coming back. So we're going to see what happens. That story I'm going to monitor equally close, only because it's pretty big if Chael comes back, man. There's a lot of interesting fights for him, whether it's at 185 or 205, especially because of the vacuum that's been created over the last couple of months with, you know, marquee names not being active. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, if it turns out to be true, I will let you guys know. 3 last bits of news to wrap things up. Kimbo Slice's son, Kevin Ferguson Jr., is stepping into the cage, according to MMA Junkie. Kevin Ferguson Jr. will make his pro MMA debut at Bellator 160. As of right now, an opponent has not been announced, but he will be on the same card that Patricio Ferreira is going to be taking on Benson Henderson. And I think it's going to be interesting, man. People are going to want to see this fight just to see if Kevin Ferguson Jr. is just as dangerous as his old man was. I kind of feel that, you know, kid's coming in, it's his first fight, first MMA fight on the big stage. There's going to be a lot of people watching, a lot of expectations, and you know, I gotta give Bellator props for, you know, trying to look out for Kimbo's family and giving his son an opportunity. I'm curious to see how that turns out. I'm also curious to see who his opponent is. Again, that debut is going to be at Bellator 160, August 26th at the Honda Center in Anaheim, California. The other bit of news is a re-signing in the UFC, and it is not a fighter, but an announcer. UFC's Joe Rogan has stated that he has re-signed with the UFC for 1 more year. He broke the news on his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. He said, "I was on the fence, man. I just do too much shit. I'm too fucking busy. I don't know if I'm doing myself or all the different things I do a disservice. I was real close to leaving. It was like either I'm just going to completely bail off of this or I'm going to figure it out." So there you have it. You're going to see Goldberg and Rogan side by side for at least 1 more year. I'm curious, if Joe Rogan were to leave, who do you think would be a fitting replacement? I'm going to actually post that in our Facebook group. Look for Rageworks on Facebook, and you can join our group and see what you guys have to say. I think there's a couple of decent guys that can get in there and do some great commentary. I mean, Frank Mir, I always felt was an incredible color commentator, and a guy who has said that he wanted to do more stuff behind the booth, especially now with his, PED issues that he's got to deal with. But I feel that once that's resolved, I think he would be a good person to have in the booth. I honestly would even go as far as saying that Chael would be a good guy to have in the booth. He's colorful. He's entertaining, good at talking shit, and I think that he would bring an interesting dynamic to the commentary booth alongside Mike Goldberg. Some people would say, Kenny Florian or John Anik, but I think that what makes the Goldberg-Rogan duo so good is the fact that, they play off of each other very well when Goldberg isn't botching certain things. And I think you need somebody that's, to use a cliched term, colorful and entertaining. And I think if anybody were to take that job, Chael definitely has the chops to meet that. That's for sure. But we'll see what happens. We got one more year with Rogan and Goldberg, and then we'll revisit that later on. Last thing to close out our MMA segment this week is, of course, my pick'ems for UFC 201 this Saturday. The prelims start on Fight Pass at 6:30. Then you got your televised prelims on Fox Sports 2 at 8, and then your main card on pay-per-view at 10 o'clock. I'm going to give a couple of my picks. The other picks, of course, I will do on Instagram, so keep an eye out for that at RageWorks on Instagram. I'll go with the prelims, Ryan Benoit, Freddie Serra. This one can go either way. I've only seen a little bit of Freddie Serra. Ryan Benoit, same thing. I'm actually going to go with the coin flip here, so to speak, and I'm going to go with Ryan Benoit on this one. Wilson Rice, Henry Sandoval, I'm going with Wilson Rice on this one. Ross Pearson, Jorge Masvidal is definitely a fight that has the potential to steal the show. Even though I like Ross Pearson, man, Masvidal is always just intense when he gets in there. So I'm going with Jorge Masvidal on this one. Ed Herman, Nikita Krylov. I like Ed Herman. I think he's always a fighter that's worth watching, and it's going to be the main event for the prelims. I'm gonna stick with the favorite and go with Ed Herman. On the pay-per-view side of things, Ian McCall, Justin Scoggins. I'm a big fan of Uncle Creepy. Can't root against him, so I'm going with Ian McCall. Eric Perez, Francisco Rivera. Going with Eric Perez on that one. Matt Brown, Jake Ellenberger can go either way. Matt Brown is a beast, but Ellenberger is as well when he is dialed in. As much as I hate to do it, I gotta pick. I'm gonna go with Matt Brown on this one. On the ladies, Karolina Kowalskiewicz taking on Rose Namajunas. Big fan of Thug Rose. I think she has the potential to go very far in this sport. Incredibly marketable and super dangerous both on the feet and on the ground. Karolina Kowalskiewicz, no slouch either. This fight can go either way. Many people are saying this is a title qualifier. I'm gonna go with Rose on this one, and not by much. Not even because I'm a fan of hers, but not by much because Karolina Kowalskiewicz is a dangerous fighter in her own right. The main event, Tyron Woodley, T. Wood, taking on Robbie Lawler, the Ruthless One. I like Tyron Woodley. I think he's a solid fighter, great wrestler. Had a great run in Strikeforce, but Ruthless Robbie Lawler. This guy gets into wars for fun, and when he gets in there, it's always a bloody affair. I think that in terms of wrestling, obviously T. Wood has the better wrestling pedigree, but I believe Robbie Lawler, being the veteran, is going to find an effective way to utilize that, to neutralize that, and he's going to use the sprawl and brawl to really take it to T. Wood, and I'm going to go with Tyron Woodley not beating Robbie Lawler retaining, and that's pretty much it. I think with regards to Robbie Lawler, that's a guy that you gotta shoot that guy. You gotta come in there and you gotta have cinder blocks for hands that are even bigger cinder blocks than the hands that he has, because he's a warrior. And it's funny because he was a heavily touted fighter, went to Strikeforce, reinvented himself when he came into the UFC, and he's been on a tear ever since. And I think it's going to continue. I think T. Wood is not going to be able to stand and trade with him, especially if he gets into the deep water. I think T. Wood definitely has the potential to bully Lawler a little bit, but I think in terms of striking and just pure punching power, Lawler definitely has more of a puncher's chance in that regard. That's for sure. So Robbie Lawler is my pick to retain. Anyway, with that, I am going to close out the MMA segment for this week's episode. Let's switch gears and jump into some wrestling, shall we?
We're going up today to kick down every line, to get anything we want, take everything inside. We're going till the world stops turning while we burn it to the ground tonight.
To many people, especially over the last couple of days, the Raw this past Monday was considered the gold standard. And it was, considered one of the best Raws in quite some time. And while I agree it was good, there's a strong case that can be made that there's been, greater episodes of Raw. But before we get into that, gotta talk about Battleground, which kind of set the standard in the post-draft WWE. And I gotta say, man, Battleground for a pay-per-view that I look at as a throwaway pay-per-view had some really, really good stuff, man. Really good matches. I didn't even want to call, look for the quote-unquote the bugs in this one, only because there was so many good things and not any genuinely ugly or bad things. I mean, the kickoff card with the Usos taking on Breezango was, it was what it was. It was an opener. I feel that the Usos have fallen off quite a bit when they're on the kickoff show, but in any case, it was it was fair for what it was. It just had no build up whatsoever. But what can you do? Sasha Banks taking on Dana Brooke and Charlotte. Her mystery partner was Bayley. And, of course, many of us thought that, who's it going to be from Raw? It can't be Bayley because she wasn't drafted. Well, it was Bayley. And I got to say a couple of things. First off, when Bayley comes up to the main roster, it is going to be a problem. If you wanted to create a quote-unquote John Cena for the women's division, the person to carry that moniker would be Bayley. Simple as that. Now, Slick is saying it was only going to be Bayley. I don't agree, only because a mystery opponent could have been anybody. It could have been Nia Jax, who was recently drafted. The reason I say that is because there was never a specification as to where her partner was going to come from. It could have been somebody completely new that they wanted to surprise everyone with. Of course, that wasn't the case, but, I mentioned last week when I did the show that it could be Bayley, but it could not. It's all about what creative wanted to do, because nobody ever really elaborated on whether it was going to be an active member of the roster or from NXT. They just said it would be a mystery partner. And as such, it could have been anybody. Like I said, it could have been Nia Jax. You could have brought Nia Jax up and had her be a face for that match. It could have been fucking Eva Marie, I mean, not that it was, because she was drafted to SmackDown, but again, I'm giving, the different scenarios here. The match itself was tremendous. Great work from all four ladies. It really shows you the incredible chemistry that Sasha Banks, Bayley, and Charlotte have. Even Dana Brooke really stepped it up, which I think is really a testament to what I always say, which is iron sharpens iron. You put good wrestlers in there, with good opponents, you're gonna get something special. And I think that this was one of those instances. And again, the reaction that Bayley got, the pop that she got when that music hit, and the little blowy dudes came out of the fucking fans. It was amazing. It was really, really cool to see. a female performer get that kind of a reaction. I mean, Sasha's got reactions on par with that, but the Bayley pop was woo. it was definitely really, really good. Rusev's match with Zack Ryder, I mean, many of us wanted Zack Ryder to win, obviously, because, the new era. But I don't think that Zack Ryder, especially with Mojo on the roster, with Mojo on the roster, I didn't see Zack Ryder winning the belt anytime soon. Slick says, I respect your opinion, but I felt I knew it would be Bayley, and that crowd did too. Dude, everybody expects that. Like I said, I said it could be Bayley. It could not. It's, I'm not going to have a pissing contest about it. It was Bayley. Everybody was happy. You knew it. Hooray. Not trying to clown you, but just, all right, you knew it was Bayley. Could have been anybody. Could have been fucking Vicky Guerrero, the Brooklyn Brawler in a dress. Santina Morella. Oh, God, was that bad. Anyway, Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens match, of course, was another classic between these two longtime rivals. I hope that this match kind of writes off any more encounters between these two superstars. And the reason I say this is because when you look at the Kevin Owens-Sami Zayn relationship going all the way back to Ring of Honor, like I've said, Ring of Honor did a really, really long program between these two guys, and we saw some amazing wrestling, amazing storytelling, amazing interviews and skits, and interactions between the two of them. And, of course, WWE saw that, and they knew that they had lightning in a bottle with those two guys, and it's great. But I also feel that they've taken too much advantage of it. So at this point, you kind of just want to send them on their own way for a little bit, keep them separate, let them, work on their own feuds, maybe come back, run that back. I've said this before, some wrestlers and their opponents, their futures are intertwined forever. When you look at The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, you see that. When you look at Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle, you saw that back then. The Rock and Triple H to a degree. Mick Foley and Triple H, and Mick Foley and The Rock as well. There's certain guys that they're just defined by the guys that they wrestle over the years, because that when you put those two individuals together, you're going to get something special. Hulk and Andre, Hulk and Macho Man Randy Savage, of course, Macho Man and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Ric Flair and Sting. You look at certain individuals and these opponents, and when you look at them, you say to yourself, man, I could watch, the quote unquote fight forever chants. That's one of those things where you see it and you say to yourself, there's something here that's bigger than just a match. It's a chemistry. It's just something that clicks from bell to bell, both between segments and just the storytelling itself. You see that, and I think that with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, these guys can fight 5 years from now, and you'll get something just as exciting and just as good as you got this past Sunday. But you can't have too much of a good thing because it wears thin, and I think the fans and maybe even the performers to a point had reached a point where it's like, all right already. We fought on NXT. We fought on Raw. We fought on pay-per-view. We fought in the ladder match. We got it. We don't like each other. Again, do I think that it's going to come back and we'll see it again? Sure. Hopefully not for the foreseeable future, but either way, the match itself was tremendous. An amazing performance by both individuals. Kevin Owens is another guy that you got to look at when you talk about, I need a flagship heel for my company, or a guy who I'd invest in. I had this conversation with Kimbo Slice a couple of days ago, and I was like, hey, if you could have your guy, the person that would carry your brand, who would it be? And his first response, which echoed mine, was Seth Rollins. You look at Seth Rollins, the guy's a complete wrestler, an entertainer, good on the mic, probably one of the best heels they got on the roster. Kevin Owens, again, a guy who has all the tools, is not the quote-unquote WWE look, but he's got an incredible gas tank to go out there and have amazing matches, always innovating when he's in the ring, tells compelling stories, sometimes without even having to cut a promo. And I see that with Kevin Owens, and to a point I see it with Sami Zayn. I think with Sami Zayn, you're always going to see that Daniel Bryan mystique, because it's the easy thing to do, the underdog. But I think Sami Zayn has all the tools to be a marketable performer in the future as a champion. I think that, you're taking a guy who has international appeal, is recognized around the world, and has all the tools. I mean, he really does. Is his promo work the best? No, but it's something that with time he could probably grow into. Natalya and Becky Lynch was about what you would expect. I felt that Natalya's work as a heel has been lackluster. Probably one of the only low points, in my opinion, on this pay-per-view, only because this feud was kind of just thrown together. I know Becky Lynch, they're trying to find something to do with her, but Becky Lynch is another wrestler who is incredibly talented. Her matches on NXT are a testament to that, and I think she's one of those individuals that you can build as a face for women's wrestling on SmackDown. And hopefully they'll do that. I mean, it's quote-unquote the new era, a term that is thrown around quite a bit, and I can only hope that she can be a good part of that, because she is a complete performer, another superstar with international appeal. I just feel that Natalya, I understood you kind of wanted to do that, and you crafted this narrative, but I just don't feel Natalya is an effective heel. I think Natalya is easier. I think it's easier to watch her work when she's a face, but her heel work just leaves a lot to be desired. That's all I'm saying. The Miz and Darren Young ended in a double countout. I mean, you can't throw it any further to the left, so to speak. I know you're trying to build Darren Young and quote unquote make him great again. You also don't want to hurt the Miz, who's been a pretty viable, IC champion. He's done quite a bit for himself, the Miz, over the last couple of months, just becoming a more well-rounded performer. I remember when the Miz came up and they put him with John Morrison as Eminem. I felt that was when the Miz, in my opinion, had peaked as a performer. And he did to a point as a tag team performer, but in terms of just being a single superstar, he continues to improve every week. I think the addition of Maurice has done a lot to just make him more viable. It's easy, obviously, with Maurice on his arm, and, she's a heat magnet, a natural one. And I think for The Miz, it's been a really good couple of months for him. I can only hope that he continues to evolve his character and become better. The only thing about The Miz that bothers me always is his finisher. I always think of Jeff Jarrett's stroke, the stroke finisher that he used to do. And even that finisher was fucking terrible. I think that one of the things that The Miz needs is a better finisher. I know they tried to do it with the figure four, and, it kind of worked, but he definitely needs something better, something that could get the crowd into it. I mean, the skull-crushing finale is just definitely not good. Enzo, Kaz, and John Cena against the Club. Obviously, the Club being broken up during the draft. I kind of felt that somebody was going to eat the pinfall in that match, and it had to be them. Enzo and Kaz, obviously, they're continuing to be booked strong. And John Cena and AJ Styles, their fates are intertwined at least through SummerSlam. So, the Club definitely was not coming out of this the victors. But the match itself was good. Good storytelling from all participants. As usual, Enzo, face in peril, seems to be the name of the game. But does a good job, man. Enzo on the mic, and even as the face in peril, his wrestling, but in terms of just selling a match, bringing an energy to a match, he's got that in spades. The triple threat match for the WWE title, Ambrose defeated Reigns and Rollins, of course securing the pinfall on Roman Reigns. Everybody who really knows their wrestling said that Reigns was probably going to eat the pin, just because obviously he's on the shit list, which I want to get into in a moment. But as a whole, for a quote-unquote throwaway pay-per-view, Battleground was solid. Solid. Couple of hiccups, but nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing super terrible, super, detrimental to the enjoyment of the card. Could it have been better in some respects? Sure, but we can all pick at it and find our own flaws, but it was damn good. As for Raw, man, there's so much about Raw that was good. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about the bugs. When it comes to the bad squash matches, I have a love-hate relationship with them. We saw Nia Jax in a squash match, Braun Strowman, the new Braun Strowman, in a squash match. I understand what you're trying to accomplish. I get it. But how necessary is it? I mean, for Nia Jax, we get it. She's a bigger woman on the roster. But I think that Nia Jax has done enough and has made enough of an impact in NXT that she could come up to the main roster, have a decent and competitive match, and be fine. Do I think that the squash match was completely terrible? No, because I understand in terms of the narrative what's being established. Hey, we want to get these two individuals over as forces in the business, on the roster, and that's fine. I just, two squash matches in a night, you could have had Nia Jax come out there and have a decent match with Deonna Purrazzo or any of the NXT women that were up there, and at least have a decent match. The glorified squash, it is what it is. And same thing with Strowman. The Strowman thing, he took on a guy who pretty much looked like it's like a car salesman. Like, did they find this guy outside and just said, "Hey, throw on some trunks and go out there and have a match"? Because, man, it was. To quote JR, it was bowling shoe ugly. It really was. Like I said, I understand the narrative. I understand the squash to get him over, but big fucking guy. You don't really need to do much to get him over except put him in there with somebody that'll make him look good. Squash matches, you don't really see a lot. And it's funny because a lot of times people, a lot of wrestling insiders or, websites that have inside track, they'll say, oh, yeah, Braun Strowman, we haven't even scratched the surface on how good the guy is, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, great. Show us. Show us how, quote-unquote, good this guy is. Let's see it. Because all I've seen thus far is typical big man offense. And if we had to look at any of the, quote-unquote, big guys on the roster, the best big guy on that roster is injured. And that's Luke Harper. Luke Harper is the complete package. He can wrestle. He can cut a good promo. He definitely has a presence, an aura around him that you're like, oh, shit. Now, Braun Strowman, again, he's got the look. He definitely looks the part of a guy who will crush your skull with one blow. But again, do we need that? Do we need the squashes to establish that? No, I don't think so. The last thing that I just felt there was a glaring overuse of pop culture relevance was fucking Pokemon all over Raw on Monday. We got it. WWE likes to take shit that's going on in the press and in the public and is the buzzword of the day and likes to do something with it. I got it. Totally cool with it. Did we need a bunch of shit happening? R-Truth running around being a fool with Goldust. I understand Goldust is a gamer. It's pretty cool. One segment would have been fine. One. You could have got away with one, but just beating it over the head. We did it the Raw before the pay-per-view with, the New Day promo. And same thing. It's like, I understand trying to be relevant, but come on. Just scale it back a bit. Let's try and get through next week's Raw without 5 Pokemon Go references. Please, let's not do that. You want to do something with Goldust and fucking R-Truth? I don't know. Let them wrestle, perhaps. You got 3 hours of television. 3. There's got to be a match you can put on that's somewhat entertaining. That's all I'm saying. The ugly. Cena, I think, I want to say, not to say that the lack of Cena on Raw is detrimental, because it wasn't, but, the 2 fatal 4-ways, when you look at it, especially that second one, you're like, damn, it almost felt like John Cena needed to be in this match. And I say this as an ugly, because when you look at it, you're so used to seeing John Cena on the flagship show, quote unquote, the face that runs the place, that you when you look at a show without him on it, you're like, damn, it's infinitely a better show. But in looking at both fatal 4-way matches, which were amazing, a couple of things. Obviously, Balor's debut was huge. Just tremendous. The fact that he won his match and went on to face Roman Reigns, who won his match, it showed you that WWE was willing to take risks. And I say this because had Cena been there, he would have been in the match, and who knows, maybe he would have been in the final, to take on Roman or to take on Finn Balor, and maybe the end result would have been the same with Balor going on to SummerSlam. But not having John Cena, I say it's bad to a point, and this is why. It's bad because it breaks convention. John Cena is always the safe pick. He can always go out there and have a good match. He can cut a decent promo. He can rile up the crowd. Not having John Cena is good, and that's why I said, it's bad on one side, good on the other, because you remove the crutch. You remove the easy out, and it forces creative to, be creative. And they did that. We got 2 amazing fatal 4-ways. They were tremendous. All the participants they meshed well together, and it worked. And the end result was a great surprise. So that definitely was a good thing. The other thing I got to talk about, the Shining Stars, man. If, I was talking about this with Josh on the drive home today, and we were talking about the fact that, the Shining Stars come out and, they're playing the foreign villains. And that's the problem, because, obviously many of us that pick up a history book know that Puerto Rico is part of the United States, but by having them come out and using the foreign heel gimmick, we Puerto Ricans are just getting booed. And obviously, I'm not saying this as a broad stroke, but just in this perspective, I'm like, damn, you're booking these guys like foreign heels, which is, it's weak. It's weak stuff, that you do. I take you back to Eddie Guerrero and Chavo. Sure, they had, they'd come out in a lowrider, and, they would have that West Coast vibe. But at the end of the day, what sold them as performers were their tactics and their wrestling, whether they were heels or faces. At the end of the day, it was the complete package that told the story. The lazy foreign heel booking is, you could get away with it with Rusev to a point, but, with the Shining Stars, it's like, all right, we got it. Puerto Rico is paradise. All right. Come to Puerto Rico where you can fucking get sunshine, sand, and the Zika virus. Like, come on. It's lazy. And it's funny because I'm sure Vince was like, yep, they're going to go out there and they're going to play the foreign heels. But Vince, Puerto Rico's part of the United States. No, it's not, damn it. Get out of here. Like, I just feel that that's lazy. It was lazy. And Enzo and Kaz doing their shtick, it's cool, but being interrupted by the Goya brothers and having those guys lose, and it just didn't do anything for anyone. It was like, all right, you got Enzo and Kaz on TV, and hey, we're gonna do something with the Goyas, with the Shining Stars, and as somebody who's Puerto Rican, you want to see your people succeed. It's fucked up, but it's like, damn, The only decent Puerto Rican wrestler, and I mean legitimate Puerto Rican wrestler who was represented that actually did something of substance was it's like Savio Vega. And I'm talking about on WWE television. I'm not talking about in the wrestling business, because there's plenty of great Puerto Rican wrestlers on the independents and in other promotions. I'm talking about in the WWE. Savio Vega is probably the most well-known Puerto Rican wrestler. Him and the hairy guy that was with him. What the fuck was his name? The dude with the hair shirt that used to be with him as part of the Los Boricuas. Was it Eddie Perez? I think it was. Damn, I got to do my homework. In any case, you look at Primo and Epico. Those guys, they come from an amazing background. Carlos Colon, Carlito. You see that, and then you say to yourself, there's such history, such rich history there, and you're not leveraging that. You're not doing that because you're using the easy foreign heel crutch. And I felt that was an ugly match. It really was. It did nobody any favors. Same thing with the New Day's Booty-O's announcement. Obviously, at San Diego Comic-Con, the New Day announced that Booty-O's was going to be a real cereal sold by, I believe it's going to be an FYE. So, definitely really cool to see that. I think they're going to do well with that. Having the club come out and ruin, quote unquote, ruin the celebration, taking AJ away from the club, obviously, it's easy to see that maybe the Balor Club will become a real thing, which, obviously you can see it a mile away, but if they don't pull the trigger on it, they're better off. I think that Anderson and Gallows can really do something in the tag team division, but you got to let those guys go out there. You have to let them go out there and work, because, when they were in New Japan and Ring of Honor, wherever they went, they had really, really good matches, really solid matches, and they did a lot. The Bullet Club faction was a big thing, and obviously you tried to kind of recreate that with the club, but not really. It was like, all right, we got to do something with AJ to really make him a heel. Oh, let's just put him with these two guys because they were together. They were, but the dynamic between AJ and the club is a lot different than the dynamic between Balor and Gallows and Anderson, because those guys legit came up together. When you look at the original Bullet Club and the members, it was, Gallows, Anderson, Devitt, Tamatonga, and you look at that and you're like, yeah, and Bad Luck Fale. You look at that and you're like, man, that's a badass group. Not to take anything away from the WWE version, but WWE's version, like anything else, feels incredibly watered down, which is the case when they tried to recreate the NWO. It's same deal. It's just you don't get the same feeling. You don't get the same presence as the original incarnation. Now, again, can we see Balor and Gallows and Anderson together? Absolutely. It's a no-brainer to do that. But I think allowing Balor to stand on his own and allowing Guns and Gallows to stand on their own, and I'm so used to just calling them that, even though it's Anderson and Gallows. You got to let those guys carve out their own niche and really put some work in, especially for Gallows and Anderson. Those guys, they need help. They need a good feud. They need to showcase their skills in some good matches. And, I mean, don't get me wrong, the New Day definitely have the tools to make that happen, but you got your work cut out for you, because right now the only association people have with them has been AJ's lackeys, if they're not seasoned wrestling fans that know the New Japan product. That's all I'm saying. Let's get into the other good points. Like I said, the two Fatal 4-Way matches, Balor's debut, all good. The women's title match, wow. We went from a stellar tag team match on Sunday to Sasha Banks and Charlotte tearing the house down on Monday, with the end result being Sasha Banks being crowned WWE Women's Champion. It was a great story. It was a great way to pull the trigger. I thought that they were going to pull the trigger for Sasha at SummerSlam, given Obviously, you know, her amazing match with Bayley that happened at NXT, you know, during SummerSlam. Again, definitely a cool way to really top off what was a really good Raw. Like I said, Balor winning, it was well executed. Like I said, small things. It wasn't completely flawless. I didn't want to put this particular thing in the you know, in bad or ugly or good, but you know, admonishing Roman Reigns, the continued you know, shitting on him. We're going to be seeing that for quite a bit, obviously. You know, he ate the pinfall. Balor beat him clean. Stephanie McMahon berated him at the start of the show. You know, Roman's going to have to eat a lot of shit, man. And, you know, it's good and it's bad. I think, you know, I think Roman's going to be one of those guys that he's going to be, you know, he's going to be stuck in mid-card hell for a little bit. But I got to tell you, and I've said this before, it's not a bad thing. It is not a bad thing. I feel that it was a blessing in disguise, and I'll tell you why. Roman Reigns came into this company, and, you know, they put him with the Shield, and as a member of the Shield, he was cheered. People loved him. They thought he was awesome. They're like, oh, man, this guy's the truth. And then, you know, when they broke them up, everybody looked at Rollins and Ambrose, and they were like, wow, these guys are good. And then they look at Roman, and they're like, this guy's good. But then the WWE machine got behind Roman, and they're like, oh, Roman is great. Roman's going to be our guy. Roman's going to be the guy, and blah, blah, blah. And they tried to carve out a blueprint for him that would have, you know, put him in the same level as guys like The Rock and, you know, other countless superstars before him. But here's the thing. If you put Roman in that position, and you do so with the expectation that he's going to become the guy, then the correct way to execute was to build him up gradually. You look at certain performers on WWE's roster, when you look at them, you go, damn, that guy's a main eventer. That guy's the future. That guy has the tools. That guy has the complete package. I hate to say it, but I look at Roman Reigns and I just see an athletic Samoan guy that's related to The Rock. Not that that's a bad thing, but do I see him being the guy that carries the company on his back into the next millennium? No, I do not. And the reason is because The Rock, when you look at The Rock wasn't the most amazing wrestler. Wasn't by any stretch of the imagination, but he had a charisma, a delivery about him that made him just head and shoulders above a lot of superstars that were, you know, looked at as main eventers. There was always something. Him, Stone Cold Steve Austin, you look at those two guys, and they are, you know, guys that were built up gradually. If you remember, Stone Cold Steve Austin was part of the Hollywood Blondes in WCW, then Stunning Steve Austin, then the Ringmaster with the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, then Austin 316, you know, obviously that, and then Austin versus McMahon, and the rest is history. But again, he wasn't, you know, nobody looked at Stone Cold and they were like, yo, you're going to be our guy. In 6 months, you will be champion. No, it was gradual. It was piece by piece, match by match, IC title, here, there, slowly getting him there. So when he finally reached the top of the mountain, when he finally grabbed the brass ring, so to speak, you saw a crowd unanimously behind him. You look at The Rock, same deal, man. You look at, you know, blue chipper Rocky Maivia, then he joined the Nation, then he took over the Nation, and then, you know, the rest is history. Roman Reigns didn't have that. He was the muscle in a group, and then he went from being the muscle to being champion. There was no build-up. There was no gradual. You didn't even have time to build rivals beyond the Shield. Which, again, Roman Reigns' future will forever be intertwined with Ambrose and Rollins because those guys, they brought something out of him that was good. But in terms of him as a character, he needs time. You gotta walk before you run. And I think that in his case, and I don't blame him at all. The guy punches the clock and does his job. Is he charismatic? Debatable. Is he the Mr. 5 Moves of Doom? Absolutely. But I will say, over the last couple of months, he's got better in the ring. He's got better, a little tighter, works a little better. Whether it's because of the alleged usage of Adderall remains to be seen. But I think Roman's in a situation where he can bounce back. But if I were creative, I would take my time in rebuilding Roman Reigns. I really would. I would take my time in rebuilding him. Maybe, an IC title program. Maybe a tag team run. Maybe have him do something with the Usos. Maybe turn him heel. I mean, obviously that's the easy answer. Turn him heel. But the thing about that is that turning him heel creates its own set of problems because people are booing him now because they just hate him as a character. They hate him. If they were booing him as a heel, they wouldn't boo him as a heel because he's a good heel. They'd boo him because they think he sucks. I mean, some people, they do the cool thing like with John Cena and you boo him because, it's a cool thing to do. But with Roman, I just feel that the crowd genuinely just doesn't like him. To a point. I mean, obviously there's probably some people that it's trendy to boo him. But, he's just the guy punching a clock right now, doing his job. Hey, you're going to be the guy. Okay. Not the guy. Definitely not. Honestly, if I were booking and rebuilding, I would probably keep Roman away from the main event for maybe a year. At least a year. Maybe even a year and a half. Get him into a good program for the IC title. Create a good rivalry with someone. Whoever it may be. Just a really good rivalry. And build from there. I mean, what they did with Balor on Monday was good. Roman post-match, he had his little interview. He was like, man, I respect that dude. And he, if he beats Rollins, I wanna have another match. And I think that's a good way to A, create a rival. B, you can use that as the seeds for, maybe the basis for some heelish tactics. Like, man, I respected you and the work you did, and then you come here and you think that just because, you put some face paint on that you can get a title opportunity. You could build off of that narrative, and then you can say, I busted my ass, I've been here, fighting my brothers, doing stuff for the fans, and the fans don't even care about me. You can build off of that, but again, gradual, baby steps, build it out. Take your time. Don't just, we're going to strap a rocket on this guy and right to the main event. Doesn't work. Very, very few guys can go from NXT to main eventer and it look believable. Can Balor be that guy? Maybe. Possible. He could be the first. Shinsuke Nakamura? Possible. He could be another viable candidate. Samoa Joe? Same thing. Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens is probably one of the few guys that if he went from NXT to the main roster to champion, it would be believable because he honed his craft in NXT, won the title there, came up to the main roster, worked incredible US title programs with John Cena, later on IC title programs. Again, gradual, the guy's proven himself time and time again. Boom, main event. The only other guy, maybe Bray Wyatt, if you're trying to create this enigma, this unstoppable force. Maybe that could work too. But I didn't understand at the time what made Roman Reigns so special. I mean, being related to The Rock, being Samoan, being good looking, having long hair, great, tremendous, fantastic. enough to make you a main eventer, enough to make you be the guy on the posters and the cereal boxes and, you know, live on you know, Kelly and Michael or whatever, or Conan or Jimmy Kimmel. No, not the guy. Not the guy. If I had to, you know, like my conversation with Kimbo Slice, if I had to take anybody, Rollins, Owens, Cesaro, I'd say Cesaro from an international perspective. Guy is, you know, world renowned, knows 5 languages, just needs a little seasoning on the microphone, but his wrestling top notch. You know, those are guys you could build with. Those are guys you could run with, rock with, do something good with. Roman, not yet. Hate to say it, but not yet. Anyway, those were the bugs of Monday Night Raw. On the SmackDown side of things, man, were they some crazy things. Let's get into the bad. Becky Lynch and Natalya getting run back. Obviously, Becky Lynch got the win with the disarmer, but then all the SmackDown divas came out, and when it ended with Eva Marie being introduced by, like, the movie phone guy, and comes out there, disrobes. Everybody, you know, crowd goes mild. People pretty much boo her out of the building. And then they cut to commercial. And I'm like, all right, maybe they'll come back and there'll be something else. Nope, nothing. It's like, I'm going to interrupt you, I'm going to interrupt you, I'm going to interrupt you. And yeah, very, very poorly executed segment, in my opinion. Not good. Bad. Rhino's re-debut. I thought they were doing something really cool with Heath Slater. I kind of like the whole unsigned thing where he's just coming in, interrupting every week. But bringing Rhino in, it's like, all right, Rhino. I'm like, okay. Don't get me wrong. I like Rhino. He's awesome. You know, he's always when somebody knows how to sell the gore, it looks tremendous. Good, steady guy that can probably hold down a mid-card. Obviously, they'll probably never let him near a big title, but still, a good guy to have, good worker, capable of being intense beyond measure. But it's like, all right, it's a new era. We got new talent, but Rhino, the best, you know, the hottest free agent. I'm like, really? Rhino? Again, not shitting on Rhino, but just the way that the announcers tried to sell that and Shane McMahon, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, they were kind of doing something special with Heath Slater, and then you just derailed it to use Heath Slater as the centerpiece for Rhino's re-debut. I don't know, man. I thought it was bad. Ugly. The Miz TV segment. Ugh. With Randy Orton. Ugh. Just Randy Orton, it was almost like Randy Orton went to the old Randy Orton that had, 97% shoulder mobility. Very, little jokey joke. It was all right, I guess. I mean, to put him in a meaningless match with The Miz, not even for the title, devalues the title. It's like, all right, Randy Orton, you got a match with Brock Lesnar. Why not challenge The Miz for the belt? Why not? Even if it was just for The Miz to cheat or for there to be some sort of shenanigans to get a DQ, but at least make it value something, not just, I feel like having a warm-up match. You'll do. I'm like, really? Like, fuck, way to make the belt mean something. I was not a fan. And I wasn't a fan of the Battle Royal. I felt that was ugly. And I'll tell you why. Because it really showed you how small the SmackDown roster is. I'm like, really? It looks like there's 6 people in there. It really did. Like, when they had the whole roster out there, it was a lot different than when they had the Raw roster out there, which was, wow, that's a lot of people. Like, the SmackDown roster, I'm like, get the fuck out of here. It looks like you only have, like, 10 people on the roster. Again, could they have padded it and thrown a couple of guys in there, just one-offs when people were out there? Sure. But it just looked like it was, like a few people. I don't know. I wasn't happy with the presentation. I thought it was good, but I wasn't happy with it. goods. Let's talk about that. The return of Shelton Benjamin. Genuinely pumped for that. Couple of reasons. Obviously, with American Alpha on the main roster, shades of the world's greatest tag team definitely are there in Chad Gable and Jason Jordan. Shelton Benjamin is an incredible athlete, a solid in-ring technician. Mic work was always questionable, but when you needed a guy for high spots and memorable moments, Shelton Benjamin was your guy. Later replaced by Kofi Kingston, but whatever. Shelton Benjamin has the tools to come back and definitely disrupt the makeup of WWE's mid-card. And who knows, maybe even their main roster. It might be the time. Who knows? But having American Alpha on SmackDown and seeing Shelton Benjamin come back, I'd love to see something, because there's so many similarities between American Alpha and the world's greatest tag team at the time. And even if Shelton Benjamin came back and he's like, hey man, I was here, you guys remind me of me and Charlie Haas when we were younger and blah blah blah. Not to say that he needs to manage them, but putting him with them, I think, is just a good way to kind of like a New Day type of a deal. Like Raw has the New Day. You have an incredible trio. Like, maybe American Alpha needs to be American Alphas. Just saying. I mean, not that Gable and Jordan aren't capable of standing on their own, but I think, a little Shelton Benjamin alignment wouldn't hurt. I think it's a good way to kind of just slowly reintegrate him back into, the swing of things. Shelton Benjamin, he could probably come back in there, wrestle, and it'll look like he hasn't missed a beat. I mean, his work in Japan alongside MVP as, Bros, Black Godzilla and Bro Dan, Japanese strong style, ghetto strong style, was great, stellar stuff. And who knows, maybe if MVP does come over, which has been rumored, maybe we'll see that. Maybe we'll see, ghetto strong style with Black Godzilla and Bro Dan. Who knows? But, Benjamin and American Alpha, it writes itself. Obviously, that's me going with the most obvious, but I think Benjamin is going to be pretty successful, man. I think it's definitely going to be good. The other good thing, Ziggler's win. Ziggler's win was good because it was unexpected. I genuinely thought that they might have pulled the trigger with Bray Wyatt this time. I was bummed that they didn't. I thought, maybe they'll do something crazy like with Balor and it'll be Apollo Crews, but, Ziggler was a welcome surprise. My only issue, and this is purely from just a fan's perspective, is that you've done so much to really hurt Dolph Ziggler in terms of just, he always goes out there. He's not a jobber, but it's like he goes out there, he has exciting matches and puts other guys over and isn't really a guy that's talked about in any sort of contention. And, it's cool that he won. Again, unexpected, and it was great. But now you have to make people genuinely believe that Ziggler has a shot at becoming champion. Because that's the thing. I look at it and I'm like, him and Ambrose, I think it's going to be a good match. I think there's going to be great wrestling, but what else? What else is there? Are you gonna make Ambrose a tweener and have him kind of be a heel, or are you gonna turn Dolph, or are you actually just gonna go with a face versus face and leave it alone? Who knows? But I think WWE has a decent window to and it's cliched, but to make Dolph Ziggler great again. They do, but again, it can go sideways very, very quickly. It was a great finish in terms of Dolph being in the match, but we'll see what happens, man. I mean, there's a lot to be said there. I think that Ziggler, if he were to become champion, it would be cool. They were talking about him going into the Kent, I believe it's the Kent State Wrestling Hall of Fame. Very cool to see that. Will that be part of the reason why he's being put in there? Who knows? But I think it'd be cool if the guy, is being inducted by his alma mater to maybe win the belt. I mean, he can always win it back. Remains to be seen. The other thing I got to say is I called it before the draft that we were going to have 2 belts, and look at that. 2 belts. WWE Universal Championship and World Heavyweight WWE Championship. So, I don't know. Kind of an I told you so, but seasoned wrestling fans knew that 2 titles was imminent. Also, out of SmackDown came the announcement that there would be a SmackDown-only pay-per-view, that one being Backlash. And, that was heavily debated. It looks like both brands are going to have their own shows, their own pay-per-views, and then obviously they're going to have their shows together, SummerSlam being one, the big shows, and we'll see how it pans out. I'm sure that there was a rumor of doing Clash of Champions to replace Night of Champions and, have all the champions compete. We'll see if that's the case, but it'd be cool to see the champions square off. I think it'd be a great opportunity to maybe put one belt on each brand on the line, or maybe just do it between either champion, and maybe that'll lead to a different type of stipulation. Maybe, I don't know, the winner of that pay-per-view, their champion gets to main event the other pay-per-view, or this would be cool, WWE Universal Champion versus WWE Champion, winner gets a trade, gets first pick on a trade of any superstar they choose, and they can trade any superstar they wish. That interesting stipulations, but you have to do something where if the champions are going to square off in any capacity, you have to make it mean something. You have to put something big on the line, or something of substance on the line to really, really shake things up. The other thing I did want to say is that maybe every year there should be a new draft. Every year there should be a new draft. The draft should be a yearly thing, and it would be a good way to switch champions, switch titles, introduce certain superstars. I think the draft should be an annual thing, and that's not to say that it won't be, but I think that it needs to be established that every year in July there's a draft, and that'll be it. I think it'd be a good way to switch up the rosters, kind of put some new blood into each show. I don't know. I think it would work. Anyway, let's get into the other wrestling news of the week to wrap things up. As I mentioned, a lot of people and a lot of news outlets are saying that Roman Reigns' wellness suspension was due to a positive drug test for the drug Adderall. For those of you that don't know, Adderall is a drug that is used to treat ADHD, and it's banned by most sports organizations because it can mask fatigue and pain and make people more alert and focused. Most of the time, obviously, it's used for its correct purpose to treat ADHD, but it is used recreationally sometimes by college students to obviously get incredible focus for tests, finals, research papers. Some just take it to function better. In Roman's case, who knows? I mean, maybe he has ADHD and he's having it treated and he's not going through the proper channels. Maybe he's self-medicating. Who knows? But in any case, it's being rumored that that's what he tested positive for. Obviously, wellness violations, while they are acknowledged publicly, it is not stated what the wellness violation was for. But a lot of speculation floating around is that it was for Adderall. Now, again, it's one of those things where maybe he did use it, maybe he didn't. But at the end of the day, was it worth it? Who knows? We'll see how it pans out. TNA's Jeff Hardy is in the news this week, as many people are saying that he has been rather vocal about his TNA contract expiring in February and him wanting to go back to WWE if they want him. Jeff Hardy's an interesting case, and the reason I say this is because obviously there's the stigma of substance abuse problems, but Jeff Hardy's fucking over. That guy is legit over. As soon as he comes out, people go crazy. He sells merch. He just looks the part. with the current landscape of WWE drafts, and the rosters being open, so to speak, a return for Jeff Hardy may not be completely out of the cards. I think that, Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy at some point are, WWE Hall of Famers for sure. Their contributions to the sport are things that cannot be ignored. The thing is, with a guy like Jeff Hardy, where do you put him? It's like having him come in and be, a mid-card savior, okay. But that's a guy that they're going to want to put the belt on. And honestly, if Jeff Hardy has his substance abuse issues behind him, I'd love to see him in a WWE ring. I think that there's a tremendous upside to having him there. It would add a little bit more star power to SmackDown, create some fresh matchups. But again, I say this with the assumption that he is clean. If he is not, that's egg on the face of the company. So we'll see what happens. Hardy's contract is up in February. We'll see if TNA is able to scrape together some money, or look between the couch cushions to keep Jeff Hardy. I mean, whether you love what's going on with him and Matt Hardy, or you loved or hated Final Deletion, Jeff Hardy still quote unquote moves the needle, so to speak. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, his contract's up in February, and we'll see. We'll see if WWE gets a new signee shortly after. I did want to talk about something that a lot of people mentioned before the draft, and that is what happens to the superstars that are injured. And it is a good question. There's a lot of superstars that are off TV, injured or otherwise, and makes you wonder where they're going to go. So, like Brie Bella. Brie Bella, on paper, is retired, quote unquote, but she's still on Total Divas. Okay. She was never formally written off on TV. Let's be honest. She didn't get a retirement thing or a going away match or nothing. It was just like, okay, I'm retiring and that's it. Is it right? Is it wrong? An interesting question. The Rock. If Brock Lesnar can be drafted and he is a part-time performer, where does The Rock fit in? Special attraction? Raw superstar? SmackDown superstar? I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, I don't know if we'll see The Rock back in the foreseeable future, but still, the guy is if you drafted Brock Lesnar, who's a part-time superstar, The Rock. I mean, if I were smart, if I were the guy that was booking it and I were smart, I would put The Rock on SmackDown because it's his show. It was named after his catchphrase. So you'd make The Rock appear on his show, the flagship show. If I was the one booking it, the smart move, I'd be smart and put The Rock on his show. But Raw being the flagship show, that The Rock will be on Raw. Simple as that. Or The Rock has no rules and he goes wherever the hell he damn well pleases. Could do that too. Emma is injured. I see her probably being put on SmackDown when she comes back. Unless they want to put her back with Dana Brooke. Could happen. We'll see. Heath Slater, of course. Free agent, baby. We'll see what happens. Heath Slater, when it's all said and done, he's so going to SmackDown, but we shall see. Luke Harper, also injured, probably would go to Raw when he comes back. I think having him on Raw is key. Or maybe they'll switch it up since Raw already has Strowman and Rowan. Maybe send Harper to SmackDown with Bray Wyatt. That could work too. Maybe tag team run in their future. Possible. Nikki Bella, of course, is injured, but she is allegedly going to be back sooner rather than later. While it's easy to say, you could put her on SmackDown, she could be the face of SmackDown. Nope. Nikki Bella will probably go on Raw because marketing. Or, if you want to keep John Cena happy, then she goes to SmackDown. But it's tough to not put one of the quote-unquote stars of Total Divas on the flagship show. That's all I'm saying. Rosa Mendez is on maternity leave. I doubt anyone noticed. Ryback is sitting out his contract, allegedly. If he came back, they'd probably send him to SmackDown, but who knows. Tamina is injured. Probably another one that Naomi's on SmackDown. Maybe you could keep her and Naomi together. Maybe. Or maybe you'll send her to Raw, but you already have a powerhouse on Raw with Nia Jax. Tamina's kind of lost in the shuffle. I would, honestly, and I said this before, send her to NXT. Redesign and rebuild. Send her down there. Have her work with the ladies down there. Round out her arsenal, then repackage her, and then bring her up. I think Tamina still has the tools, man. She still might have something to offer. Triple H, everybody's like, Triple H. Triple H he's a fucking executive at this point. Doesn't even matter. I mean, if he decides to be active, it's going to be on Raw, so it's a no-brainer. Tyson Kidd is injured. If and when he comes back, he'd probably go to SmackDown with Natalya, more than likely. Unless you want to reunite Kidd and Cesaro, which there's always that. But I think given him coming back and et cetera, I mean, his return is already in question, but if he did come back, I'd honestly put him on SmackDown. I think he'd be a good mid-card addition, and having him there with Natalya is not a bad thing either. And of course, The Undertaker, much like I said about The Rock, part-time guy, can go wherever the fuck he wants. I mean, Brock Lesnar drafted for the sake of semantics, but honestly, The Undertaker could go where he wants, but much like The Rock, he'll probably end up on SmackDown unless The Undertaker was like a guy who only appeared on Raw and The Rock appeared on SmackDown, but that would involve logic and not necessarily something that floats around too often. But, after Monday's Raw, you never know. Lastly, speaking of Brock Lesnar, he will be on Raw this Monday to, of course, assist with the build towards SummerSlam. Maybe mix it up with Randy Orton. Maybe come out and kill a couple of tag teams while they're wrestling. Who knows? Now, the thing is, a lot of people were saying that Paul Heyman's contract was up and he was allegedly renegotiating. Will we see the Advocate return to lead Brock to the ring on Monday, or will Brock be solo? We shall see what happens next time on Dragon Ball Z. No, I'm kidding. We'll see how it pans out on Monday. Anyway, with that last bit of news, that is actually going to wrap up the wrestling segment for this week, and it's going to wrap up the show as well. So, with that said, you have just heard or watched episode 355 of My Take Radio. Archived episodes of this show, well, let me rephrase that. Archived versions of this show, as well as past shows, can be found in audio format on iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Video formats, YouTube, Vimeo. YouTube being the best. Vimeo, we're still working the bugs out. You can subscribe to Official Rageworks on YouTube to get this episode and any of our past episodes, plus our unboxings, product reviews, gameplay videos, and countless other stuff. And of course, like I said, audio is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio, but you can also find the audio file and the video on RageWorks.net. Just go to My Take Radio, find this week's episode, and boom, you get audio and video in one neat little package. iTunes will also be the best option for those of you that are getting the show on iOS. Everyone who is getting the show on iOS says that iTunes updates very quickly, usually within minutes of me uploading a show. So if you're on iOS, definitely iTunes. I mean, some people use Stitcher for that, and I've heard that the delay between iTunes and Stitcher getting the shows is pretty decent delay, but results may vary. But if you are on iOS, definitely going to recommend you using iTunes to consume the show. On Android, you got a couple of options. You can listen to the show directly. You can download the MP3, of course. You can stream it through Stitcher or stream it through TuneIn Radio. Also, you can use the official My Take Radio app, which is $1.99, available for iOS, Android, and Windows devices. You're going to get access to mobile wallpapers, exclusive content, high-quality audio versions of the show as well. It's $1.99. We've been working on making it free, but it's $2, people. You know, purchases of the app that go towards helping MTR and RageWorks become better for you. Last but not least, if you are interested in advertising or being a guest on a future episode of My Take Radio or any of our other shows, feel free to reach out, rich@rageworks.net or mtrhost@mytakeradio.com, whichever is easier. As for social media, I've given you my take. I'd love to hear yours. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/official RageWorks. You can also look for RageWorks on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram as well. And of course, we do have a presence on Google Plus and Pinterest. If you're into that, we do post a couple of things there as well. All right, guys, on behalf of myself and the rest of the RageWorks and MTR crew, thank you guys for tuning into episode 355 of MTR. I am out of here. I will see you guys later today for the gaming and entertainment edition of My Take Radio. Peace.
I'm rich, biatch!
That's all, folks.